All right, folks, we are live. Welcome to the Football Outsiders live stream for June 2nd, 2022. I am Aaron Schatz, Editor-in-Chief of Football Outsiders, joined as always by Mike Tanier, and today joined by Derrik Klassen for another show in our series on position tiers. We're also going to get to talking about some of Derrik's year 2 breakout guys near the end of the show. But first, we just want to say a so long to our sweet, sweet prince, Ryan Fitzpatrick, who apparently announced his retirement today with a text to a bunch of his ex-teammates thanking them for his career. Started at least 3 games in each of the last 13 seasons. One of the greatest journeyman quarterbacks who has ever journeyed from team to team.
He's a Hall of Famer in his own weird way. In that, if they section off a weird part of the Hall of Fame, like a weird back corner for journeyman, I mean, he's the guy.
He'll be back there with Vinny Testaverde and Kerry Collins and Steve DeBerg, the Hall of journeyman quarterbacks.
Yeah, he's had quite a career. I mean, for a 7th round pick, that's pretty awesome. Where does Ryan Fitzpatrick fit in the tier list? Doesn't fit anywhere because it's going to be a running back tier list. So for the tier list today, the categories are a little different than we did last week for wide receivers and tight ends. You'll notice when we put it on the screen that there are a lot of C categories, because of the fact that running backs tend to group around average. I mean, because they're all good athletes. They're all pretty good. Like, there's a lot of them that are pretty good. So a lot of teams are just kind of a C. So we're going to do the same thing we did last week, which is we're going to start in the middle. Mike's going to give his tiers. Derrik and I will do a little commentary on when we think teams should move up and down. And we're going to start with the C and go down, and then we'll go back up and do the best teams.
Yes. And C stands for committee, because when I was putting teams in C's, I was trying to put just the committees together. And then you get a C plus or a C minus if I think it's a good committee, committee. But we're going to start the C committee in honor of today, June 2nd, which is two-a-day, not to be confused with two-a-days, because all of Dolphins Twitter is a Twitter with the fact that Tua Tagovailoa completed a deep pass today. So starting out,
I'll just point out Chad Pennington used to complete 2 or 3 of them every year, so it is possible.
And Ryan Fitz completed a few in his day as well. Yes, we're going to start with the Miami Dolphins, who have a brand new committee full of running backs they acquired this offseason, whose names escape me right now because I've got a lot of names juggled in my head. But we're going to start with the Dolphins as the first of our C teams.
Chase Edmonds.
Okay.
Raheem Mostert.
Yeah.
And Sony Michel.
Oh, God.
Plus Myles Gaskin, who's still there from last year.
Yeah. So excitingly average. A lot of quantity. Okay, quality.
I at least can appreciate that they're all have very different qualities, right? Like Edmonds can be a little bit more of a space and catch guy. Sony Michel is obviously more of like we just need somebody to eat 1st and 10 carries. And then Raheem Mostert is like more of just if you can get him going in a straight line, he's gone. I'm not necessarily that high on any of them. Even like Chase Edmonds, I think last year really benefited from the way they used James Conner to be like the main workhorse in Arizona. So I at least appreciate that they can all do different things. I'm just not sure any of them are that great, which I mean is probably fitting if you're a C tier team.
Yeah. I'll put another C tier team out there. The New York Jets. A committee featuring Michael Carter, who looked pretty good last year, and now featuring rookie Breece Hall.
Yeah, who, I mean, we, had a great backcast projection, but until we see him do it in the NFL, C works for me.
That's kind of all it is, right? Is like, I think if Hall is as good as he's projected to be, or at least as good as I think he could be, this is like a C plus, maybe even like B team, because I actually am really high on Michael Carter too. But again, like you don't know exactly how these guys are going to look. So I don't know. You're basically going off of Michael Carter and like whatever carries you think Tevin Coleman might get, which is meaningless.
Yeah. And that's the thing. We can move these around as they come along, but it is tricky when you're talking about the potential of a rookie and a guy who was in a committee with a bad offensive line, a bad offense last year. Up next for the most committee-like of the committees, the Seattle Seahawks and their 73-piece drum corps of mid-round running backs that they have acquired over the years and decades.
Well, higher than mid-round. I mean, they used a freaking first on Rashad Penny and a second on Kenneth Walker. They just play like they're mid-round.
Yeah, Penny is a mid-rounder in my mind. And I like Walker a lot. I know Chris Carson, I believe his career is over. I think he's still on the roster technically.
Right. I might up this if we thought Carson was going to play again. But, I mean, I know we're not projecting Carson to play this year in the Kubiak projections.
Right. Who else is Kristen Michael still on that roster? I've even lost track of some of these guys.
Travis Homer.
I feel like every now and then he is.
Travis Homer and DJ Dallas.
I think those guys are just pass protectors, really. Like that. Carroll is just like obsessed with that, so he has to keep enough of those guys on the roster. I think it's probably fine with me because, like, I think Penny is actually kind of good. It's just that he's never healthy enough to like be good for a long time.
Right.
So that's kind of tough to project. And then again, they have a rookie like Breece Hall. They have obviously Kenneth Walker. So they're just a weird group to project.
Joey Stuck says Seattle looks like a committee now, but just wait until week 2 when there's just one healthy running back at a time.
Probably.
And a reminder, by the way, of course, that if you're watching on YouTube or Twitch, please comment and ask questions in the commentary discussion. We love to hear from you during the show. If you're listening afterwards on the Football Outsiders Podcast Network, you should be listening live 1 p.m. on Thursday, so you can comment on these tiers as we build them.
Absolutely. You know, there's a couple of these are about potential. Like the Jets were about potential to a degree. The Seahawks are about the potential. Jacksonville Jaguars make the seed tier based on the potential when you get Travis Etienne back, and you've got Robinson there, who has played well in the past. But that's it. It's potentially a decent committee.
And it's just a health issue, I think. I mean, Etienne's obviously coming off of missing the entire season. And then even, James Robinson is coming off of not having finished the year healthy. So I think they're both good players if they can play. And they're both super complimentary of each other. Etienne's obviously like a space guy, really good catching the ball, really good. He's fast. Robinson more of a thumper, but like you just don't know what these guys are going to look like until they play again.
Speaking of health issues, the Baltimore Ravens count as a C to me. And this might be a little high right now, but you have the full group of J.K. Robbins, who I think we've seen as a talented back, Gus Edwards. They brought in Mike Davis, who was this weird Falcons binky guy. I know you guys might be higher on him than I am.
I mean, he was good with the Panthers 2 years ago, and then he was lousy with the Falcons last year.
I mean, I felt like he was good for like 4 games, like had 4 hot games, and then was like,
he's probably better than Latavius Murray at this point. You know, if guys get injured again or can't come back, but he's not. I mean, they want to give that work to Dobbins and Edwards. They want Dobbins and Edwards to be healthy and be the guys.
Yeah. And they got Tyler Batty in there, who I kind of liked in the draft. They had Justice Hill, I liked a couple of years ago coming out. He's always hurt. And I threw Patrick Ricard. Remember, they've got a fullback they used a lot in there. So I don't know if you guys think higher or lower. All the injuries and all the, kind of sort of he was good for half a year just meant C for me.
I almost might be inclined for C+ because of Ricard, actually. Just because he's one of the better fullbacks in the league and they can kind of do a lot of stuff with him. And I think he's a perfect fit for all the, some of the pistol stuff that they do with like moving around H-backs and fullbacks and stuff. So if anything, that's actually oddly like the kicker that I would maybe put them up to C+, but I'm also not going to argue that harshly for a fullback to be there.
Yeah, I think if they were if we knew definitely that Dobbins and Edwards were healthy and doing what they did 2 years ago, then definitely I would put them higher. But I think we just don't know at this point. Although, I mean, there are other injured guys that I might stand for. So, maybe. But
they also, some of the other injured guys also have like a longer track record. Like Dobbins doesn't have that long of a track record. And even Edwards is like not that impressive. So.
And there's a lot of carries in that offense where, Lamar Jackson is, faking off the edge and taking the linebackers with him to a degree. So it's hard to tell. Like you look at Justice Hill's numbers and like these 6 carry for 55-yard games. And it's like, well, what were these carries? Was it pretty much a draw play every time he got the ball? Also in the C tier, and this one, I might think I put them too high. Arizona Cardinals, James Conner, Darrell Williams, Benjamin.
Yeah, they were shockingly good last year. These guys, I mean, Darrell Williams, yes, he was really good because he was in Kansas City, but there were other guys who were with powerful offenses who didn't have numbers as good as Darrell Williams as a receiver. Right. And Connor, his whatever 3.8 yards per carry or whatever it was, is sort of, altered by the fact that he had a lot of short yardage carries. So he didn't, if you're carrying it from the 2, you can't go 5 yards. You can only go 2. And he had a good amount of value last year. So I'm not going to argue to make them higher, but C seems about I don't think they should be lower than this.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I might move them higher because I do think Connor is really good. And I think to your point, some of why he was in some ways less efficient than Chase Edmonds is, to your point, he's the guy who's taking all the carries that suck to take. Right. He's really good at that. I mean, he scored a lot of touchdowns. He was really good inside the red zone, short yardage and stuff. It's just that, it kind of depends on what, how closely can Williams be what Edmonds was for them last year, because I think Edmonds is probably a better player. I mean, Williams is still good, but I think they're probably slightly downgrading, so it's hard to move them up a tier, if that makes sense.
Right. Joey Sucks mentions Edmonds was 10th in success rate last year. He was very high in DR, and it really was. Here's a high percentage carry, and it went to Edmonds, and now here's grunt work, and it went to Connor a lot of times.
A lot of times, yeah, which got Connor a lot of fantasy value because of touchdowns, but yeah.
Right. Joey Sucks also asks, are the teams in tiers ordered from left to right again? Yes. I mean, tier maker is the absolute limit of my technological skill. So I just kind of throw them in there.
I would think of every team in a tier as basically being equal. That's why you do tiers.
Yeah. Exactly. It's tiers. It's when they popped into my head or where they were on the little thing when I was moving them around with my mouse. Speaking of which, we have the New England Patriots coming up the rear here with their long list of committee backs.
Yeah. You're going to say that I'm a homer on this.
Never. I never accuse you of that.
I'm not happy to be arguing for the Patriots running backs. I would much rather have J.C. Jackson on the Patriots than argue whether the Patriots should be a C with running backs. But I do think with James White back, and given how good Harris and Stevenson were last year with a rookie quarterback, so that, they were going up against defenses that were clearly playing the run, I would put the Patriots a little higher. I'm not happy about that. I'd rather have them be higher at another position than running back. But I do think that's where they've decided to put their cards. So
I think I kind of agree, though, because I think both Harris and Stevenson can be 20 carry type of backs, just in terms of they are able to withstand that workload, and they're good carriers of the ball. And then getting James White back is huge. And then if you get literally any value out of Pierre Strong, I think they're for sure a C+ group, if not better. So I think I kind of agree with moving them up.
Would you say let's keep them in C+, or would you even argue for B?
Looking at some of
how much credit do you think the offensive line of the Patriots?
Well, a lot of credit. Yeah, that's probably
definitely some. But also to Aaron's point, teams were playing the run because they're the Patriots weren't going to blow the top off of anybody. So I think that probably counterbalances itself. To me, they're probably better than a couple of the B teams, but not necessarily enough of them to where I feel super strongly about moving them there. So definitely C+, maybe B if we talk through some of the more B teams. Yeah,
we'll leave them at C+ for now.
Yeah. And Hiker's Pie says they don't have a Kamara. Saints probably don't have a Kamara too, but we'll get there.
That's a different problem.
We'll get there. And another team I was just tricky to play, so I stuck them in C because I figure they don't have very many fans, so who cares? The Detroit Lions. I happen to like DeAndre Swift, and I think we all like Jamal Williams as sort of like the leadership guy and the great interview guy and things like that. But it was hard to tell. The one thing that team could do really well was run the ball between the tackles, and I didn't know how much that was the running back, the scheme, the fact that opponents were yeah, go run the ball. We're going to win anyway, or where to place that running back core.
I think I'm fine with Detroit in the C. Yeah, I agree. I mean, especially DeAndre Swift is good, but he's never been healthy. And also, I just don't think he's ever going to be a lead back. That's why they have Jamal Williams there. Yeah. I will say I do like Jamar Jefferson as a third back. Yeah, I think he's really good, but that's obviously not going to move the needle here.
All right.
We do have a Lions fan watching, by the way. Haha. True Mac says he likes the Lions.
Oh, I'm sorry, True Mac. I will never make fun of the Lions.
Watch till the end of the stream.
Oh, don't lie like that, Mike.
There's good stuff coming for the Lions, but not for running back.
There's good stuff coming for the Lions. There's
All right,
tons of stuff coming.
C minus. Let's go down from C. C minus.
C minus. I'm going to start with the Los Angeles Rams, who, if you talk about guys who are never healthy, Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson, both of whom look great in like spurts on, but they're never healthy. I don't see a lot of reliability from either of them. And they're in an offense where a running back should be successful. And a lot of times the success turns into, 10 carries for 47 yards. Like if you're really good in this offense, you should be doing more than that.
I think if you told me both guys would be healthy for 17 games, I think this is a B group. However, we have never seen either of them do that. And I worry that they're not going to be able to do that again. So if they do, great. That would obviously be a huge boon for this Rams team, especially because they're probably going to regress in some areas. That's just how it goes. But yeah, these guys are not going to be healthy enough, and they haven't been to this point. So it's just tough.
Right. Also in the C minuses, we have the Houston Texans with the scourge of the Chargers, Rex Burkhead, still in the NFL, along with Marlon Mack, who was this Indianapolis Colts binky guy for a couple of years until they said, Jonathan Taylor. Okay, that's right. We're not going to mess with Marlon Mack anymore. And I think I kept him at C minus and not a D because I'm a big fan of Damian Pierce, rookie out of Florida State, because he's a dog lover.
Florida.
He has three. Florida. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a reformed Gators fan, so I had to.
He's a real smash mouth guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's actually, what's funny is to me, he's actually really similar to like Mike Davis, who we brought up earlier, but just like better, and obviously doesn't have, thousands of carries of hits worth of, stacked up at him at this point. So I think basically whatever you think of the Texans running back room is like 90% just hinges on what you think of Damian Pierce.
Right. He's got to be.
So I'm going to say he's a draft pick. We don't know anything about what he's going to do in the NFL. He didn't stand out on Backcast like Breece Hall did. I'm going to argue that they should drop to D.
Wait, before you do that, Andy Yanovich at fullback.
I'm going to argue that they should drop to D.
No!
You might get me on some fullbacks, but not that one.
Well, Derek, what do you think? C minus or D?
I think I'd probably move them down because I think there's at least one D team in there that I prefer over them. So I would probably put them down to D.
Yeah.
If you guys run into Pierce, man, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. All right, I lost my tier list, so it's going to take me a second to find the other team. Two other teams. The Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, there's a controversial one.
Tell me about Christian McCaffrey. Tell me a bedtime story, Grandpa, about Christian McCaffrey and back when he was good.
I think healthy Christian McCaffrey is good. It's just, when was the last time he was healthy? Basically never. And, at this point, you have to wonder, not only like, is he going to get hurt again? It's just like, what percentage of himself is he at this point after years of injury? Like, is he 85%? Is that really good enough? Like, I don't know. It's just, and I don't really care for any of the guys behind him. So I just.
No Chuba?
Yeah, I guess I would argue to raise them because I think McCaffrey is still pretty damn good, but I'm willing to hear that the injury, there's just too much injury question about him, and there is nothing behind him.
I might raise them to C. It's just, the injury precedent is like probably as bad as anybody at the position right now.
They have Donta Foreman now too, and he played well down the stretch for a few games. But again, C-Mac comes back and he's like he's Rex Burkhead, he'll be better than Rex Burkhead, but he's just that guy. That would be my concern. I was going to create a tier with just a little pond with just him and Saquon on it. The little pond of like overpaid, great college rookie year backs, but we didn't. So this is what we have here. The other C- team is the San Francisco 49ers. Again, they have guys who I think are system guys, and that's why they're down at C-.
My only question about that would be, if we're counting Juszczyk, should they be higher?
I think if we count Juszczyk, they should definitely be higher. But I agree with like the running backs, system thing. Like, none of these guys really stand out.
No, they're probably on any other team. They're just dudes.
Yeah, on any other team, you put them in like Miami, and like they get 200 yards a year. Who cares? But if we do add Juszczyk, I might bump him up because that dude, I mean, he's probably it's a like niche thing to say, but he's probably the best fullback of my lifetime. So, I mean, that has to count for something.
JP wanted to put Juszczyk at wide receiver last week to move them up.
Yeah,
So
I think he counts as a running back. I think he counts as a running back,
Yeah.
and I think that moves San Francisco up.
move them up.
We're not going to end up with a lot of teams below C, which is a little wrong since C is supposed to be average, but let's do it anyway. Let's go with it.
So it goes.
There's
a lot of good running backs.
Where you going to put him? C plus?
I would say C.
I would say probably just C because the running backs themselves are like, yeah.
Well, then we're going to wind up with a lot of teams at C. It's perfect. It's going to be a perfect bell curve, ladies and gentlemen. But we have a couple teams at D, and sorry, Cordarrelle Patterson, but I'll start with the Atlanta Falcons because I think Patterson is a good player and was a fun story. He's not this outstanding running back. And the names of the other guys on the roster escape me right now, but I don't remember being blown away by them. Mike Davis is obviously gone.
They have Damian Williams, who I thought played fairly well in Chicago last year, but like not enough to where you're getting excited about anything.
Right.
And then they drafted Tyler Algier out of BYU, who is like a huge bruiser, but also like, what is a 5th round rookie really going to do for you? Like that probably shouldn't move the needle if you're trying to rank them. So I think D is probably fine because like they
somebody
have
has
some players,
to be
but
D.
Yeah, like somebody has to be among
average.
the worst. And when you compare them to all the other rooms, like they don't stack up.
Patterson is a nice athlete, and it shows the issue with the running back position, which is that these guys are all good. Like so, but somebody has to be below average, and Atlanta is one of them.
Right. You grab a longtime kick returner and you stick him at tailback, and he's as good as anybody else. That's the Patterson story in a nutshell. Well, somebody who has to be D, I mentioned them a moment ago, the New York Giants, because we're done. I hope we're done pretending Saquon is going to bounce back and be anything but like a guy. And he's being backed up right now by Matt Breida, who's just part of the 49ers scatter the wins with fast running back, old 49er guys thing. And Gary Brightwell, who is just one of these sort of third down guys that you grab in the middle rounds.
I think too with Saquon, it's not even just the injuries piling up at this point.
Mm-hmm.
This is like total speculation on my end. I just feel like there's something like he just has to get out of that organization. Like it just feels like something there is stale. It's not working. It's not ever going to work. I don't know if he'll ever be good again on some other team, but like I feel like if he's going to be good again, it won't be in New York.
I can see that.
Call that Allen Robinson disease, I believe.
Yeah, like something like what? Yeah, I could totally see something like that.
There's a little bit of how are we going to focus everything around you when you're healthy with him, and it winds up being let's run you off tackle a lot. Like that's our big solution to this problem behind a weak offensive line. And that's probably going to change now because I think they're a better regime.
Yeah, Daboll's going to have different solutions to the problem, but they're probably going to be minimizing Barkley.
Yeah, that regime is like let's just amortize what's left of your contract right now. That's their thought on this.
We did count, by the way, people are asking in the comments. We counted Patterson as a running back last year. He was a wide receiver in past years. We counted him as a running back last year because last year he played more running back than wide receiver.
And also, Joey Sucks is asking about Debo. And of course, right now we can't count Debo. We counted Debo last week as a receiver. We can't count him as a running back right now when it's pretty obvious that he wants that to disappear. The last of the D teams is my favorite team to make fun of during these tier lists, unfortunately, the Chicago Bears. David Montgomery's another guy who is like, oh, he's flashed this potential when healthy. He's healthy here, he's healthy there. The offensive line is always bad. Backing up is Khalil Herbert, Darrytown Evans.
Montgomery breaks a lot of tackles. He has a surprisingly good Kubiak projection compared to average draft position. Scott is a real believer in him. Scott Spratt is a real believer in him. Their offensive line sucked last year, which Derrik knows because he was writing the chapter and I edited the unit comments where he wrote about how bad it was. I would move Chicago up to C- because it's their offensive line that is holding him back.
I agree. And honestly, it's not even just Montgomery. I actually kind of think Khalil Herbert is like a really good second guy. He's not somebody who's necessarily going to like create many explosive plays, but I think he's in a similar mold to Montgomery where he's fairly shifty for a guy his size. He can still take a fair amount of hits, and his vision actually impressed me despite like how bad the offensive line was and how few chances he really got to prove how good his vision was. But I think as a number 2, he's really good. And then Montgomery, if he's healthy, I think is a really good back. It's just, that offensive line is, I've written enough about it that I don't even want to talk about it.
So that's our C and below. Now let's boost up to C+ and move upwards.
So these are committees plus, okay, where I think we're a little better group. But guys, we're going to start with the Los Angeles Chargers, okay, with Austin Eckler and all the goofballs that they have behind Austin Eckler, starting with Isaiah Spiller, the rookie, and they have Justin Jackson there. Just a lot of guys, Larry Roundtree, et cetera, et cetera.
If I believed in any of those guys behind Eckler, I would move them up, but it's Eckler and a bunch of dudes.
Yeah, that's it. I will say, like, Eckler, even as recently as like 2 years ago, I was kind of a skeptic. I didn't think he was that good between the tackles. I thought he was more of like a slightly better than James White, but I actually think over the past couple of years, last year in particular, he's done a really good job being able to take hits. His vision between the tackles has gotten so much better. He's like a legitimate, like workhorse back now, which I don't think was true a couple of years ago. It's just, like you said, the dudes behind him.
He can.
I don't know if any of them should get snaps.
He can do it all, but they really limit him. He never goes over 19 touches in the game. And then the guys behind him are just, here's replacement value. Here's living off the fat of the land back. Maybe Spiller will be different, but I think Kelly was really weak.
They just need guys to take hits for him. It's really all it is.
Right. Next up, a more controversial choice, I think, the Buffalo Bills.
I'm going to guess controversial because most people would expect them to be lower.
And I know that we tend to be higher on them because when you really dig into the metrics and dig into the tape, Singletary looks very good. But then, you actually just look at the results, and the results, for a variety of reasons, just aren't impressive.
Partly because they just pass the ball a lot and they don't run that much. And in particular, for fantasy purposes, they hand the ball to Allen. Allen runs the ball at the goal line. And Bro Delicious, by the way, is angry about our disrespect for Montgomery.
I guess
we did move him up, but you probably think that he should be higher than C-. And I think there's a legitimate argument for that because their offensive line was so terrible. Right. Singletary is another guy who breaks tackles like Montgomery. I might lower Buffalo to C, but I get it. People like James Cook a lot.
Yeah.
What I would say about James Cook, we've been doing this thing with all the rookies of like, we don't want to project too much. I will say, at least with Cook, he fills such a clear role on the team that probably provides value. He's very clearly going to be their pass catcher, which they didn't have, I don't think. So yeah. I think that's nice. The thing that makes Buffalo the trickiest to me is just like they clearly didn't even care about having an interesting run game until like week 13. So it was honestly hard to like even judge what those guys were doing in the rushing offense until they started doing more pulling stuff, getting under center a little bit more, actually trying to have a run game. And then Singletary looked really good. So if they do more of that, I'm actually kind of fine with this ranking. It's just, I don't know if they're going to again.
It was like the late Andy Reid before he got a little more interesting in the run game, late Eagles era, where it's just like, this is something we do so Deshaun Jackson can take a couple deep breaths.
It's like a child eating their vegetables. It's like, we know we have to do it. We don't want to do
it. Another C.
Speaking of a child eating their vegetables.
And Andy Reid, the Chiefs, where we have the combination of Clyde Edwards-Helaire and other Clyde Edwards-Helaire, otherwise known as Ronald Jones, two guys who you're like, yeah, based on their scouting reports and their measurables and everything, should be fabulous, and then you don't get a lot of results on the field.
I actually think Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think, is like good. He's just not as good as the first round pick, which is like the problem that he's kind of run into at this point. Ronald Jones, I'm on the other end. I don't think he's any good at all. I'm so done with Ronald Jones. Every year we do this thing with Ronald Jones. Oh, this is going to be the year he breaks out.
Yeah.
I feel like the Kansas City running backs are nothing special. I'd drop them.
Ooh.
I might drop them too. Like I do think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is good, but he's not like he's not any like special kind of good, like you said. Like he's just like a slightly above average, like whatever.
The thing is, they get to the playoffs, they're like, "Oh, Jerick McKinnon." We always have a guy.
Yeah.
Let's put him out there, and it's like, "Oh, he's really good." So
Remember the random Derrik Gore game?
The random game, and every random D. Williams game, and like 8 different D. Williamses rolled in, and I actually get them mixed up all the time. So, are you guys moving him down?
I'd say we move the Chiefs to C.
I'd probably move them, yeah.
Okay. Moving down to C. We're gonna have a big C, but that's the point. The Raiders.
The Raiders at C+.
C+.
I mean, it's how good do you think Josh Jacobs and it's Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake.
Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake are good push-pull there. You got Zamir White, another Georgia running back, coming in who does a lot of things Josh Jacobs does. And don't forget the incomparable Brandon Bolden from the Patriots coming in to provide all of that leadership and special teams ability.
I know Jacobs wasn't as good last year as he has been at certain points. But I think a lot of that had to do with the offensive line was just like really, really bad. I mean, like Alex Leatherwood did not have a good rookie year. They obviously lost Rodney Hudson at center, so that was kind of a problem. Like they just weren't that good on the interior, and I think that hurt him a lot. If they get any degree of better at run blocking on top of, I think, Josh McDaniels being a good just offensive play caller and stuff, I think Jacobs can be pretty good again. So I think this is a good tier for them.
Yeah, I'm good with them here.
Okay. And since we already mentioned Ronald Jones, my last C+ team are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with our guy, Lenny. And I'm looking it up because I'm a little unprepared right now. Gio Bernard's still there. Yes, he is. And
Gio
Rashad
Bernard,
White, a pretty good rookie.
And then the rookie, White.
Right. So this depends on how you really feel about Lenny.
I think this is like fine because like Leonard Fournette, I think he is definitely better than what we remember at the end of Jacksonville. I mean, at the end of Jacksonville, he was like not an NFL caliber player basically, but he's like quietly been like pretty good in Tampa Bay, and he's like learned how to catch passes, which is a new thing that nobody thought he would do. So I think he's like a fine starting running back, and they have some other guys. So I think
C+ for them. Yeah.
Awesome. So when we go to B, if C stood for committee, B stood for big name. Okay, and some of the things like Lenny was like on the fringe there a little bit. So these are teams that sort of like you got a big name for the most part. There's a few exceptions, and we're going to start with the Cincinnati Bengals. We have a big name in Joe Mixon, who I think is an effective back, and a bunch of guys behind him, Perrine and some others who are replacement level dudes.
Yeah, I'm good with them here.
Yeah,
like
I don't really have anything to add. I mean, I think this is pretty perfect for them.
No notes. All right. Next, B for big name, the Minnesota Vikings, with our big name Dalvin Cook and his backup.
Yeah, a year ago I would have put them higher, but surprisingly disappointing performance, I think, numbers-wise, from Cook and Madison last year. So I'm fine with them here.
Well, Cook is entering that point in his career where he just starts becoming a guy.
He's just been broken down too many times that I just don't think he has quite the explosiveness that he used to. So some of the big plays that you were getting just aren't there. So I think B is probably fine. Still really good, just not quite what he used to be.
B for big name. There's a few names bigger than Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas, but they're only really here because Tony Pollard, his committee back, is a very strong 1B, or he's the 1A, honestly. So combined, it's a pretty solid backfield.
Joey Sucks just said he was shocked that we hadn't put Dallas in yet because Zeke looks like he lost a step. And if it wasn't for Pollard, Dallas would be lower than that.
I think Zeke actually was battling like a lingering issue last year. I don't think it was like, so I don't know if he can be healthy again. I think, man, I know I'm higher on Zeke than everybody here. I think if Zeke is healthy, they would be A, but I think because we don't know he's going to be healthy, I think they have to be B.
He's also in this place where he's like an anything for the team guy, where he's out there blocking like a madman and stuff like that.
I think that's why I love him. It's like he's the best pass protector in the league. He's actually a really good pass catcher. He's just obviously not as explosive as Pollard. Pollard's better in space, but Zeke is like a pretty capable pass catcher. And then I think between the tackles, he just does such a good job of not ruining plays and like getting the most out of stuff. So I think that's actually why he's a great fit with Pollard. Like they're just so complementary of each other. So I like it.
He's going to have a long tail to his career like Chris Johnson did, where all the 2,000-yard seasons are wrong, but he's out there hustling all the time. He's out there pass protecting and stuff like that, and he's fast still, so he keeps getting the jobs. B for big name, Green Bay Packers, Aaron Jones, and a very capable backup in A.J. Dillon.
This is the one I might move to A.
Okay.
I think I'm with moving them
Dillon
to A
is
as
really
well.
good.
Because I think they can both be the lead back there. Like if one went down for whatever reason, I think they could both get 20 touches a game. I mean, AJ Dillon, like he should be starting somewhere. It's just that he happens to share a room with Aaron Jones, who's also a Pro Bowler.
Yeah, let's put him at A.
All right. Some love for the Green Bay Packers. This one was my hardest one. The New Orleans Saints with Alvin Kamara, who we don't know his status in terms of legal status, and Mark Ingram behind him. So that was kind of like between their big names. Ingram just keeps on kind of going and being somewhat effective no matter what. And, so here they are at B. Go after
Kamara was terrible by DYAR last year. It was worst running back in the league at running. Yet I still feel like he's dangerous.
I think a lot of that was like the offensive line was really bad and they couldn't push the ball down the field. It was similar to the Patriots problem where like the team, they couldn't throw the ball down the field, especially when they had the injuries at quarterback. So it was like, of course teams are just going to be able to key in on Kamara, and they didn't have Michael Thomas. It was like, who else were defenses afraid of but Alvin Kamara? So I think, if they can get normal again, Alvin Kamara will be really good. And then like Mike said, somehow Mark Ingram is like a really good number 2 for until he's not. I don't know. He's just really good.
Right. More B's. Big name, Najee Harris. Team, Pittsburgh Steelers. I think it's a heck of a back who's behind a pretty weak, borderline terrible offensive line with no quarterback. And I think he could be a heck of a player.
Yeah, I'm fine with that argument.
Same.
I'm not a great big fan of Benny Snell or Anthony McFarland or the guys behind him, but
no.
Yeah, but I also do think like that is less of a concern considering Harris can like take 30 touches a game and he can catch and he can pass protect. Like he can do all the things that you would typically ascribe to the backup. So
right. And now we have some teams that have a bunch of guys, but they're a bunch of good guys. We're going to start with the Washington Commanders with the combination of Antonio Gibson, J.D. McCaskick, rookie Brian Robinson out of Alabama, Jared Patterson, that little bowling ball out of Buffalo. And I think that's a pretty good combination of receivers, power backs, versatile backs that pushes them up to a B for me.
I don't feel like they're any different from the Patriots.
Yeah, I don't think I could have them in a higher tier than the Patriots. They're probably more of a C+ to me. I think I'm also just lower on Antonio Gibson, which is probably the biggest thing for me. And then the other thing that would theoretically move the needle is a rookie, Brian Robinson, who I don't know, that's tough.
Right. If you look at it like McKissick is similar to James White, Gibson, it really isn't any better than Damian Harris. A rookie versus Ramondre Stevenson, they seem pretty similar. So if we're going to have the Patriots as a C+, I think we have to have Washington as a C+.
All right. Sorry, Commanders fans. I tried. I didn't try very hard. But Eagles fans, I will die on these hills. And I'll die on the B hill for Miles Sanders and Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott, and a team that ran for well over 2,000 yards last year with the help of their quarterback, yes.
And the offensive line.
And a great offensive line anchored by Jason Kelsey. But I got the Eagles in the B tier.
I like it. I think they're good players. It's just like last year, I think Sirianni literally did not know what to do with them for the first 2 months of the year. And I think that kind of spoiled our perception of a lot of these guys. But I think once they started to figure it out, it was like, oh, Miles Sanders is actually, he can be a lead back. Oh, Kenneth Gainwell is a really good number 2. Oh, even Boston Scott is still like a really interesting third guy. So I think B is totally fine.
We've got 4 teams left. Four. 3 you have in the A tier and 1 in the S tier.
Yes.
Let's see if people can guess the S tier team while we go through the A tier teams.
Yes. So we'll start with the first of the A tier teams so that build drama. The Denver Broncos with our boy Javonte, number 1, with Melvin Gordon at number 2. And he's a guy who, when you fit him in at number 2 and you're only paying him, $2.3 million or whatever a year, he's really good there. And Mike Boone is a very good number 3. I mean, maybe he's just a replacement level guy, but if you look at him, he's always averaging 5.5 yards a carry, or getting 5 carries for 40 yards in relief. That's a great 1-2-3 punch right there.
Yeah, I mean, this room is awesome.
Okay, because I was going to say I'd want to see Javonte Williams doing it a little bit more before I put them in A. I would put them in B, but I know people are pretty strong believers in him, and I own him in a keeper league, so I'm a big Javonte Williams fan. So
his broken tackle numbers are nuts.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, I actually do agree kind of with the skepticism is probably like too harsh of a word, but just like a little more wait and see with Javonte Williams. I'm actually with that, but I think I'm also higher on Melvin Gordon generally. He's like obviously he's like a decent number 2 runner, but also he's just like a really, really good pass protector. And for me, that kind of matters a lot. So I just think they have like this insane 1-2 punch.
It's like when you ask the coaches, well, why do you keep this veteran around? Well, he passes, protects, he takes care of the ball. In the fourth quarter, he's got both hands on the ball and all these other things. Like, oh, that's why you keep the guy who's been around for a few years. And that's kind of who Gordon has become. Plus in the locker room, etc. A tier, probably no surprise here. The Cleveland Browns. I believe.
Yeah, definitely.
I believe Joey Suggs brought this up here with Hunt and Chubb. And that kid was really awesome on Thursday night last year, Dearness Johnson.
Yes, I would leave them here. I would not put them in the S, but they are absolutely an A.
The only reason I wouldn't move them to S is not that like Chubb or Hunt are bad pass catchers, but it doesn't feel like they have like a specialist in that regard. So that would kind of be what would hold me back.
I think Hunt is more of the pass catcher. He's not like a James White, but he's more of the pass catcher type of guy.
Exactly.
Right, like the heavy pass catcher type of guy. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of screen game with what they do. They don't send them out, I think, as often downfield. Now, in the A tier, more or less, out of respect and out of the fact that I am on Nashville radio a lot, and I have to show Derrick Henry the proper respect, he remains in the A tier, although I have gone on record saying that he is Kentucky Fried Chicken at this point.
Yeah, it's a really tough one because if you go by what we think is possible that's going to happen to him this year, they would be a B.
Right.
But if you only go by how he's actually performed over the last 3 years, they're definitely an A.
Because he continues to defy.
Because
he continues to defy the idea of like, oh, if you take a bunch of carries, you're going to fall off, and like he just keeps not doing it. Last year, he kind of did.
Playoffs last year, but that's like a 1-game sample. So
he fell off. He injured his foot. He fell off. That was the fall off.
Yeah, big whoop on that.
Right. And I'm not a big Hassan Hankins fan as the rookie backup. And, so there wasn't anything to do that. But again, Derrick Henry, A, don't yell at me. Don't yell at me, Nashville radio fans. The S tier is no surprise. Todd Singer called it earlier, called his shot. Jonathan Taylor, for now, and like it always is with running backs, it's like, well, he's got 2 years or whatever before we're talking about him the way we talk about Derrick Henry. You got Jonathan Taylor there. I'm a big fan of Nyheim Hines as your number 2, just in case something goes wrong. He's your pass catcher who can come out and do things. Got a couple other guys on the bench there, but it's really about Taylor, and that's what keeps them in the S tier right now.
Yeah, I would think that if Taylor got hurt, Philip Lindsay would take his job more than Hines would. Hines does his thing. He does his Nyheim Hines thing.
Lindsay's Hines also. He's also that guy. He's like
he's more of a runner than a pass catcher, though, isn't he?
I think what happened is he was in Denver during the year when everything was like a swing pass from Flacco to Lindsay, and Lindsay was like had 3 guys coming on him every time he got a swing pass. I think he's more of a scat back to me, but anyway, that's a good 1-2-3 punch anyway.
I think Lindsay is a better runner. It's just he's so tiny you can't do it for 20 carries a game.
You'd have to give some of Taylor's carries to Hines, but I don't think Hines would suddenly take all of Taylor's work. I think
because they want Hines splitting out. They want him catching passes. They want him doing all that other stuff. They don't.
Yeah, I mean Hines is very good at his role. It's the McKissick role. It's the James White role, but they do not want Jonathan Taylor to get hurt.
That goes without saying. I'm trying to see if they have anybody else as a big back there. I guess Tyson Williams would be the big back. No, they would put Lindsay out there and Hines, I suppose.
The Colts are definitely S tier, though. Taylor was super ridiculously special last year, and Hines is good.
Yeah, I mean I think Taylor's the best back in the league. By probably a step above everybody else. And then Hines, to me, is probably the best in that particular role that he plays. I think he's probably the best, unless you want to count Alvin Kamara also being that guy, which I don't count that because he's a full-time.
Look at that. You were worried about not being sort of a good bell curve around average. Look at that. We get the Colts in the top tier there, and it's beautiful. A beautiful shape to our running back tier list.
I'm good with it. I'm good with it as is.
Yeah, I think so.
We'll get some good argument on the site about that, and hopefully more people will listen to the show afterwards and hear what we have to say about why we have these teams where they are, and hopefully we didn't diss David Montgomery too bad. Before we go today, the other reason I wanted to have Derrik on was to talk about some year 2 breakout guys. We were going to do this a couple weeks ago, and we ended up doing just wide receivers. But I asked Derrik about some guys that he liked who weren't wide receivers, more of a scouting take, not just, fantasy related. So we've got a list of 7 guys, and I'm going to ask him a little bit to talk about these guys. And these are guys that we really like. Some of them are first and second round picks, so they're not the top 25 prospects list per se that Rivers is going to put together. But tell us a little bit about these guys here.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll try to go in order of like how much I actually think they're going to matter. Christian Barmore, I think last year was his only real issue, I think, to me was consistency. But if you watch some of Barmore's best plays or best games, his technique in the run game was like really good. I mean, just like perfect shot shed moves. Like it just was unbelievable, some of what he was doing. Obviously, when you come from Alabama, you kind of expect that. But you add that on top of when you watch him as a pass rusher, I forget what game it was, but he had like 2 swats where he just like bull rushed somebody and then swatted the ball in front of the quarterback. He just does a little bit of everything. He's so explosive. He's already technically sound. I think his only real issue was like sometimes the game moves a little fast for him. But I think, when you go into year 2, that's going to be totally fine, and he's going to be unbelievable. The next that I would put on the list, I think I would probably group Cleveland's Greg Newsome, the cornerback, and then Raiders safety Trevin Merrick, like kind of together. Just because, so I'll start with Newsome. Newsome is just like he's kind of wiry, but he's really fast, really sticky. He had a couple of really good games last year, I think, against like the Steelers. Just like a really smart player. He understands like when he needs to come and break down on routes and stuff. My only concern with him would just be like sometimes the bigger receivers can kind of get the best of him because he's a little wiry. So I think maybe if he can get a little bit better in that regard, but the fact that he's the number 2 there, next to Denzel Ward is like, I think he's in a really good position to continue to get better and be a really impact player. And then in the case of Trevin Merrick, I think the scheme change is going to be huge for him. Last year, obviously in Las Vegas, he was playing with Gus Bradley, where he was the free safety. So actually, I'll rewind a little bit. He played at TCU, where they did they're like the split field gods, right? Like that's what Gary Patterson did. So he played a lot of split field at TCU. You go to Gus Bradley, he's playing like on Jupiter as a free safety. And that like he was good. He was still pretty good at it. It's just like that's not really how you maximize his skill set. Now he's getting Patrick Graham as his defensive coordinator. Patrick Graham, I thought, did an unbelievable job with Xavier McKinney last year with the Giants. And I think they're actually pretty similar players in that they're both really smart. They can do enough of the one high. They can do some of the split field stuff. They can come down and tackle. So I'm really excited to see Merrick in a new scheme there.
I'm stealing all your Merrick comments for the unit comments for Football Outsiders Almanac. But I did notice it's like, oh, yeah, he is a free safety. And I didn't think that's what he was coming out of Texas Christian. And part of it also was they were struggling a little bit at cornerback. They needed to keep these guys deep. They're not going to be great at corner, but they're going to be a little bit better at corner, more physical corner. They'll be able to slide their safeties around a little bit.
That's a good point, too. I mean, last year they couldn't afford to not have somebody in Jupiter saving plays. So I guess it made sense.
He was much more of a hitter in college. Like he was known much more.
They let him come up and play ball. Yeah. And last year with the Raiders, they didn't have that one because they needed somebody to sit back. But then also they had Jonathan Abram, who is like, that's all he can do. Yeah. So he had to do that. So I think that was kind of the thing with him. Next, I'll kind of move on to both of the Lions guys that I have here. I have Derek Barnes, the linebacker.
Yeah, big on the Lions defense, huh?
I am. And even last year when they hired Aaron Glenn as defensive coordinator, I was like, oh, this is really good. He made some of those Saints corners better than they should have been, namely like Ken Crawley. The fact that Ken Crawley was good for like 2 months at one point is an unbelievable testament to Aaron Glenn. Anyway, Levi Onwuzurike, I thought he did a really good job with the Lions last year. He's not a particularly flashy player. He's not like a super going to be in the backfield all the time, but just in terms of a guy who could like consistently anchor for a defense and allow linebackers to play the game fast, I think he's going to be able to be like a pretty solid anchor there for them. Maybe similar to like a Michael Brocker's tier of player where he's like scratching Pro Bowls, but maybe not always the best. I think he could be something like that.
Playing next to Brockers, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's also playing next to him, which I think really helps.
Todd Singer would like to know where Derek Barnes went to college. He's not aware of.
Barnes is a Purdue fellow. I don't know if Todd would have known this. I don't know if he watches much Purdue. But yeah, Derek Barnes. My thing with Derek Barnes is we're obviously moving into an era where linebackers are smaller, faster, they're better in coverage, all that stuff. They're really pseudo safeties. Derek Barnes is an old school. He's going to hit somebody. And I just love that. I think he's like an ideal Sam. We can also like kind of just play traditional 3-4 inside linebacker. I think he's going to be so good, especially in run defense, just coming up, hitting people, condensing space, all that sort of stuff. And then I think in coverage, he's not great, but as like a zone guy, I think he can do more than enough. So if he takes the next step next year, just in terms of seeing the game a little bit faster, I think he could be like pretty good. Another linebacker, actually, I have Ernest Jones. I did not think Ernest Jones was any good early in the year for the Rams, but I think as we saw kind of down the stretch, they really, really, really needed speed at linebacker. And when he was able to play for them, I actually thought what he provided over Troy Reeder, and just in terms of speed, being able to get to the sideline, was huge for the way that they structured their defense. You know, when you only have one guy in the middle, right, it matters that guy can run, and Ernest Jones can run. So I don't know if he's necessarily a complete linebacker yet, but I think he's a perfect fit for that defense, and I think any degree of improvement would be really impressive.
Yeah, Troy Reeder couldn't really run.
Troy Reeder, man, that guy. Anything outside of the guards was just not for him.
Right. Was studying up on him for the Chargers chapter, and it's like, oh, but the thing is, he's replacing Kazir White, who's here in Philly, and it's like, it's a different kind of.
Yeah, a very different kind of.
Yeah.
The Rams have just not paid attention to this position for the last few years, and now they've got Wagner and Jones there.
Yeah, that pairing I think is going to be so good. Obviously, Bobby Wagner is not what he was, but I think it probably mattered a lot for Jordan Brooks' development. I think Jordan Brooks is fantastic, and I think it probably mattered a lot for his development that Bobby Wagner was there to help him do that. And so I think bringing Wagner in, even if Wagner is not the individual player he used to be, helping Ernest Jones along is probably going to have a lot of value for them.
And if Wagner is in there when it's 3rd and 2 and there's a fullback and it's Hulk smash, which was what
he's still going to be old Wagner.
he can handle that.
Yeah. The last guy on the list is actually Steelers center Kendrick Green. He was a little bit up and down last year. Obviously, the Steelers offensive line as a whole was not very good. But I think there were just moments where he looked like a really, really good athlete at the position, where he was able to very quickly cross somebody's face and like steal them off of a play so that Harris could get in. Obviously center's a really hard position to be good at early. Creed Humphrey for the Chiefs broke that mold because he was just incredible, but that's the outlier. That's the exception, right? And Kendrick Green is not that, but I think he showed that he's a really good athlete for the position. I think the fact that he could start as a rookie is pretty impressive. So I just think another year of development at a position that really, really, really needs those mental reps, I think could be huge for him. I think he could be really good. And then obviously, being better at center kind of has a cascading effect for your guards, which, good Lord, the Steelers need that. So
they cleaned up. They added a couple of veterans at guard, right?
I think they got like James Daniels and somebody else that I can't remember. So I mean, you add that on top of whatever I think improvement we're going to see from Green. Maybe not going to be a great offensive line, but it should be a whole lot better than the bottom 3 unit that they had last year.
Yeah, Mason Cole is the other guy who I don't know if he's going to be a starter or not. He's not great, but James Daniels is pretty good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, those are the year 2 breakout guys to watch for. So go Lions defense.
Go Lions defense. They have some, not year 2 breakout guys, so they have some other guys I'm kind of excited about. Oruwariye.
I don't know if you heard of this Aiden Hutchinson fellow, but he's good.
Aiden Hutchinson, pretty good. I mean, they have some other decent pass rushers, like the Aquaras are kind of fun.
Yeah.
I don't know, they're a fun defense.
Cover the spread. Cover the spread.
They should have a special position just called Aquara, and it's played by either Aquara or his brother Aquara. Like, some defenses have the Jack linebacker. Detroit has the Aquara.
The Aquara role might be the putting the undersized edge guy at nose tackle, which is a thing the Lions did last year. So maybe that's what it is.
People think Dan Campbell is spitting out chaw when he's trying to say the name. That's the problem.
All right, that does it for today's show. Derrick's going to be back next week. We decided he's going to do run defense tiers with us next week. We're going to do run defense tiers next week. Mike will be back next week too. Thank you to everybody watching on Twitch and YouTube. Thank you to all of you listening on the Football Outsiders podcast network after the fact. Remember, we're here Thursdays at 1 p.m. So next Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern time, we're going to do run defense tiers. Feel free in the comments on the site for when we put this up to argue about our running back tiers some more. And we will see you all next week.